Coming to you from deep inside the bowels of a great big empty. Get ready for another episode of The Home Defense Show with Skip Coryell.
Hello, American families. Welcome to this week's episode of The Home Defense Show. I'm your host, Skip Coryell. And if you love your family, care about them deeply, and want to learn how to protect them in every facet of your life, then you've come to the right place. Oh, we have a really good show for you today. We have a newcomer to the Home Defense Show. Certainly not a newcomer to Michigan concealed carry or Michigan politics. We have Chuck Perricone, the former Speaker of the House for the Michigan State House of Representatives. He is going to be with us in segments 2 and 3, and we're going to be talking to Chuck all about the history of concealed carry here in Michigan. He was Speaker of the House and was one of the primary backers of concealed carry and helped to get it passed into law. That would have been House Bill 4530. We're going to have a great interview with Chuck. Chuck is a friend of mine for, probably over 15 years now. So, awesome guy, awesome interview. I'm going to change the format of the show a little bit, just for today. Normally I do news and tell you what's going on in my personal life here. But this interview with Chuck Perricone is important and it's good. So I'm going to run that interview long so that you can get the benefit of the history and the knowledge and the wisdom all about the legislative process. You know, how do bills get made? How do they get passed? What goes on behind the scenes? That's all good stuff to know. Plus, I also have a bit of a heavy heart today. On a personal level, I lost one of my best friends just a few days ago. Larry Jackson passed away this last week. He had a heart attack. Actually, this was, I believe, his third heart attack in the last couple of years. He had open heart surgery. He was mending, seemed to be doing just fine. And then he unexpectedly passed away. I'm kind of sad about that because Larry was more than just the sponsor of the Home Defense Show. You guys don't know this, but he was a former business partner of mine. When we formed Midwest Tactical Training, Larry was half owner, and he taught me a lot about business. You know, I taught him about instructing, teaching. He taught me about business. And it's just really sad, you know, when you lose a good friend. So I'm dealing with that right now, and so is his family. So please keep them in your prayers this week because they're going to need it. You know, when someone important like this passes on, it leaves a big hole, and we're still trying to fill that. But you know, it seems like people either loved him or they didn't love him, if you catch my drift. Larry had a strong personality, you know, bit of an alpha male. But I want to give you a personal side of Larry that didn't always come out in public. A couple of years back, Sarah and I and the kids weren't doing real well financially. It's not something that I publicized because I don't like charity. I like making it on my own. I got some pride, right? But a couple years back, we were having trouble making our bills. And I didn't tell Larry this. Somehow he found out. And who should show up in the summertime but Larry and his wife, Nancy. They show up to our house, and their truck is filled with groceries. You know, good groceries, not the kind I buy. You know, all kinds of steaks and chicken, you name it. Really good food. And they just gave it to us. And it meant a lot to me. I mean, a lot of people knew that we were struggling, but Larry and Nancy were the ones who actually did something about it. And then a few months later, we're getting close to Christmas, and I've got nothing to buy my 3 little kids. Again, Larry and Nancy, they ride on in, and they bought Christmas presents for our children. It's hard to find friends like that. But that was Larry. At his crux and core, that was his heart. And that was the part that most people never got to see. You know, the part that they got to see was the gruff part. You know, the part that was opinionated, that liked to be in charge. But you know what? He had a soft, gentle interior and a gruff exterior. You peel back that exterior, and you just had a warm, fuzzy, lovable little fuzzball. He'd be mad at me for saying that on the air, but, you know, that's the way he was. You know, he was a man of action, a man of integrity and virtue, high ideals, and he was intensely loyal to me and my family. And because of that, we are dedicating episode 127 to Larry Jackson, owner of Elite Firearms. Awesome guy, a true loyal friend, and a good God-fearing man. All right, like I said, we're not going to do any news. We're going to cut this segment short because I want to spend as much time as I possibly can with Chuck Perricone, former Speaker of the Michigan State House of Representatives. We are going to come back and we're going to talk all about how the Michigan Concealed Carry Bill, House Bill 4530, how did it get passed into law? Because it was a slow train coming, and it took a long time to do this. And Chuck was there the whole way, and he knows the inside story. All right, we got a 2-minute break here. While we are away, go ahead and check out our sponsors. Center Shot Indoor Gun Range in Dorr, Michigan, where it's always a perfect 70 degrees. Go to centershotgunrange.com to check them out. And then also Firearms Legal Protection. Go to firearmslegal.com/Midwest Tactical and protect your family against the criminal justice system should you ever have to use your gun to protect the ones you love. When we come back, Chuck Perricone, former Speaker of the Michigan State House of Representatives. This is Skip Coryell on the Home Defense Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
My name is C.J. Coryell. Welcome to the Home Defense Show with my dad, Skip Coryell. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about my book, Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book. More and more people across the country are seeing the dangers in society and are deciding to carry concealed to protect themselves and their families. My new book lays it out step by step. It'll teach you how to protect and defend the ones you love. Get the benefit of 17 years of teaching experience and a lifetime of training for this important role in society and in your family. You can get Civilian Combat real easy. Just go to Amazon.com, search on Skip Coryell Civilian Combat, and it'll pop right up there. Don't put it off any longer. Get Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book by yours truly, Skip Coryell. Would you like to take your tactical and marksmanship training to the next level? If the answer is yes, you need to check out Center Shot Indoor Gun Range just south of Grand Rapids, conveniently located off US 131. Center Shot is one of the most advanced firing ranges in Michigan. Center Shot firing lanes have nearly 100 customizable shooting programs to make you better no matter what your skill level. Our advanced lanes allow a more immersive training experience to enhance your senses. Controlled lighting and target movement mean that you get the best practice and most fun out of Center Shot Indoor Gun Range. Memberships are available for as low as $150. Center Shot also offers a 10% discount to U.S. military veterans. So, no matter what the weather, hot, cold, or in between, Center Shot Indoor Gun Range is always a perfect 70 degrees. This is where I train every week, and so should you. Find out more by going to centershotgunrange.com or call them at 616-371-7468. Stay safe, and I'll see you at Centershot Indoor Gun Range.
This is Colonel Danny Gillum. I host Frontlines of Freedom, a weekly syndicated military talk radio show. One of my co-hosts is Skip Coryell, the host of this show. We cover things that impact military and veteran communities, and we do it from the veteran's perspective. The show is broadcast across the nation and is also available as a podcast on our website, frontlinesoffreedom.com. Please join Skip and me weekly on Frontlines of Freedom.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the Home Defense Show. This is your host, Skip Coryell. Today, we have a very special treat. We have a newcomer to the Home Defense Show. We have the Michigan former Speaker of the House, Chuck Perricone. Chuck, welcome to the Home Defense Show.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to speak to you, Skip. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Hey, not a problem. I am honored. Chuck, you and I have been friends for a long time. Funny how that happens. You know, you get up in your 60s and it's like everyone you know, you've known for a long time. So,
well, I'm right behind you, so I understand what you're saying, sir.
Oh, gosh, yeah. You know, Chuck, you were Speaker of the House, back when Michigan passed their concealed carry bill into law. And a lot of, but before we get into that, can you just, for the newbies, the millennials that are listening out there, tell us a little bit about Chuck Perricone. How did your career go? Who exactly is Chuck Perricone?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. I'm glad you're not asking my mother that, actually, because she thinks she's convinced I'm the mistake by the lake. I'm the only conservative in the extended family, with the exception of my children, my own kids. Wow. Everybody else is not just left; they're far left, and they have always looked at me as an oddity. Misguided, and what the hell went wrong? And that's just kind of the way it's gone. My uncles, my grandparents, everybody. I had a normal childhood. I was very active in high school. I absolutely loved it. A little bit of sports, a little bit of music, very social. Went to K College. I got into K. Michigan State wouldn't take me. My grade point was, I think, as coined by George W. Bush, a gentleman's C in high school. Michigan State said because of my extracurricular activities, they knew I'd go there and just party like a fool. K College, because my test scores were high, said, we'd love to have you because we want some normal people, not just nerds here. And, if you'll mix and kind of liven things up a bit, well, I didn't. It was a struggle because the classes were... And I often say, and I'm a Western Michigan University grad, bachelor's, I often say that K College you read books, Western you read chapters, and that's not to denigrate Western. I think that's true of probably most universities. Kalamazoo College was a bear. But be that as it may, politically, I had my awakening during the Watergate hearings. For whatever reason, I spent, and I remember this well, I spent the bulk of that summer watching Congressman Sam Ervin preside over those. I found it absolutely fascinating. I still can't tell you why. I remember Jimmy Carter's cornfield ad and telling my parents that he looked like a good guy when I was too young to vote, even though he was far more liberal than I ever realized at that time. I jumped into the county Republican Party. I was able to go to a state convention. Reagan, Baker were there. It was in Detroit. I loved it. I always knew I wanted to run for public office. When I was at K College, I took my my development quarter and spent it full-time interning in Lansing for a conservative state representative from Bangor, who was a retired apple farmer. Had a great time there. At that time, the now House Office building, or the old House Office building, I should say, was a hotel, and I stayed there directly across the street from the Capitol. And I remember my big job at one point was to go sit in my hotel room across the street and call back with updates on the Jackson State Prison riot, which I watched on television the entire day and was reporting in. The Capitol had split floors at that point. People shared what were then called secretaries. Drinking on the floor discreetly was okay. Smoking. There was a Playboy Club in town. This was the early 80s. It was the staffers had been there for decades, or there were careers. It was a different time. Fast forward, I graduated top of my class in accounting at Western, which at the time was a survival goal for me. I had children. I desperately wanted to get out of the plain wall paper mill because I wanted what I thought would be a day job.
Yeah.
And wear a suit. I succeeded. Pricewaterhouse recruited me. Unfortunately, I absolutely despised it. I can't even tell you how much I despised that type of work. The people were great, but oh my gosh, I found I was not a creature of the fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
So I rotated from there to Plant Moran, and long story short, I wasn't much happier there, and I don't think they were either. And I saw an opening to run for county board in Kalamazoo County, despite the fact I'd grown up in Otsego and was the new kid on the block. I came within a few points in a swing seat, lost, but the guy that I almost beat said to me, wow, I really thought you were going to win this thing. And I thought, maybe I can do this. So a year later, I jumped into an open house seat, which was city of Portage and some townships around it, and worked very, very hard, put everything I had into that, and thank God I won, financially, I should say. And during that time, we bought a house on Nichols Road. It was a duplex by design. That's what we were looking for. And my then wife, Jennifer, started the daycare and raised our kids at home. So that all worked out well. I went to Lansing. It was 1994. It was the Republican wave. And I served with veteran members. They had all been there for decades. Term limits was still in the future. And I served with them for 4 years. As luck would have it, I came out of accounting, so the tax committee chair requested that I be appointed vice chair, and I was. And then, son of a gun, he ran for the Senate a few months later in a special, and I was elevated to tax chair at a time when we were cutting taxes. I think there were 27 cuts that 2-year term, and I was right in the middle of it, which was, it sounds really cool, and yes, it was a wow. Before term limits, everything was seniority. So, what the heck was the new kid doing as a chair of tax? I ruffled a lot of feathers.
Yeah.
But, oh, my gosh, what a ride that was. It was a blur, but holy cow, that was something. And then the next term, of course, being politics, we were in the minority. So chairmanship's gone. I'm now assistant Republican leader, which meant absolutely nothing. And I served as finance chair for the election. Worked very hard, raised a record amount of money, came back and was blessed with being elected Speaker of the House. And okay, now you got it. What are you going to do? Simply put, being young, brash, I think at the time I was like 38, which was considered quite young. First speaker under term limits. Senate hadn't turned, all veterans. Governor Engler had been there for years, had years to go. We were the new kids, 64 out of 110 new members. It was something. Well, we had a meeting before I was sworn in, and I brought in some of my trusted confidants, and the questions were very simple. Do you want to leave popular, or do you want to leave having done something? I, of course, said I want to leave having done something. I had no intention of being in politics for a career.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, it was, okay, what issues are we going to tackle? Well, concealed carry had been around for a long, long time. Senator Alan Cropsey had become a very good friend of mine. He'd been in the House. We served together. We were part of the No Caucus, which was 12 votes. David J., Greg Keza, Alan, myself, and a few others. I found myself a part of that group by accident, just looking up at the board one day and realizing, why am I always only one of 12 red votes? And it was, I was typecast right out of the gate. So my credentials were legitimate. I was actually a part of that caucus, but we had looked at concealed carry under two prior speakers when I was there. Both times, Alan Cropsey and others were just so passionate about it, and they got nowhere. They would introduce the bill. It wouldn't even receive a hearing. The veterans under term limits, if it was an issue that was controversial, it never saw the light of day. That was that culture, which is why I supported term limits and why America supported term limits. Well, those were written in such a way, with foresight, I think in large part due to John Engler's influence, that if it was ever tossed out at the national level, which it was, the state of Michigan's term limits would continue, which they did. So you move the clock forward. I'm now speaker. We're new. What are we going to do? Well, one of the issues at the top of my mind was concealed carry. And I promised Alan Cropsey that when we did it, I would bring him back. To fast forward again, that Mike Green was always going to be the guy that was going to carry this in my mind, and I'm sure in his. Mikey was retired from GM, had run for the House, had the same passion I did. He was a first-termer, 98, came in with the new members. And he was intense, respectful, but all about the issue. And, you know, the funny thing is, we had plans to introduce that bill earlier in the term, but things kept happening in the news. And we knew that when we introduced the bill, there would be a huge backlash, which, of course, there was.
Yeah.
And we were all set to go, third or fourth iteration, and there was a shooting of a student. I seem to recall it being in Flint, but the research I did last night, it was actually in 2000. This was 99, so it was a different shooting. But it involved a young student, and I called Mike, and I said, Mike, you know, don't drop the bill. We need to reconsider the timing. And, of course, he was very disappointed, but agreed. Well, when we finally did, we moved it within a month, which was always the plan, because we knew the backlash would be huge. And at the time, the Attorney General, Jennifer Granholm, said, as we expected she would, there will be blood in the streets. That's a quote. There were a number of comments she made. The press was all over it. The front office, the governor's office, was not at all pleased with me because they knew that what I would do. And at that time, and I'm not necessarily proud of this now, but I still can't think of an alternative that was available to me. The only thing I could do to move things, if they were especially conservative and on the right like that, was to become an obstacle for everything else. I had no power. I was the Speaker of the House, but the Senate and the governor didn't care. I mean, they would call members on the floor. The governor called members on the floor starting in the back of the room and working up towards the front where I sat when there were bills were up for votes that he disagreed with, and he'd pick them off one by one. And members would come up and tell me the governor's making calls. I mean, that's the way it was. That's what I was up against. So I had to become an obstacle on budget bills, policy bills, and I was just enough of an ass that I was willing to do that. So, and by the time we moved this, they knew I would. So we got it introduced. We moved it through committee. The votes on the floor were, I think, like 75 to 32. It was pretty handy, which everyone knew in prior terms. If it ever made it that far, it would pass. Now, their story would be the reason it would pass is because there were enough legislators afraid to go home if they voted no, and they didn't feel that was rationale enough to move it. The other reason it didn't move in a prior term, and this may get you or me in trouble, but it's true, and you can talk to the members that were in the House at that point, brass roots.
Oh, yeah.
Brass roots' approach was a disaster in the Capitol. Now, I know there are members out there that are passionate, believe in it. I've seen the plaque, 400 pounds, brass casings. I get it. I support you. But the way they approached the issue set that issue back more times than I can count for more years than I can count. And I had to overcome that. And Mike had to overcome that when he introduced the bill as sponsor. We were pummeled with grassroots this, grassroots that. It was very detrimental to the movement. And there are some groups out there now that, because of that type of an approach, aren't doing us any favors. And I'd be happy to come back to that in a few minutes if you'd like to. But that was one of the things we had to overcome. The front office, there was someone that was going to run for governor, called me, asked me not to move it. The theory was that if it moved, it would be on the ballot that fall, and that would bring out a different mix of voters, which would be detrimental to that particular campaign for higher office. I, of course, ignored that. The governor's office dropped, I think it was a stack of over 30 amendments on my desk moments before the vote on the House floor. And we had been asking for weeks, if you've got any amendments, bring them on over. Well, they didn't. They did that day, and it was with a big thud. It was very theatrical. We ignored them. So we moved the bill, kicked it over to the Senate, and they moved it within a week out of committee, discharged it from committee with no hearing to accelerate it because of the backlash that everyone knew would be there. They may have had some no votes, but I think it was mostly abstentions because people didn't dare vote no. And then it ended up going to conference committee as expected, and the House bill eventually moved and was signed into law. The excitement of the evening was the debate had gone on and wanted everybody to have a chance to speak because we knew we had the votes and it would move. And we pulled the move that I'd seen once with the veteran members in my first 4 years, where when you hit midnight, you have to start over. Now, what that means is the House clerk has to then reread through all the bills that are going to be moved, and the first paragraph and who sponsors, and it's protocol. It's all protocol. Well, we turned the clock back, and I had Alan Cropsey up at front with me at the rostrum. We turned the clock back. You send somebody up there to the gallery, and they literally reach down and literally move the hand back. And I had Alan do the prayer. Mm-hmm. And we did the prayer for the new day, the new session, and then we went ahead with a vote and tapped the gavel, and we moved it. And, of course, he was thrilled to near tears, and I knew it was very important to him and me. And I will say, in full disclosure, for those that remember this, yes, I did insist on one particular portion of that language to include the fact that if you had ever abused children or your spouse, you weren't going to automatically get a CCW. That was something that I insisted upon, and I did that for two reasons. One is I knew, and those that were thinking about more than just that particular issue knew, that everyone in the world would be waiting to see what kind of people got these permits and what was going to happen. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't have that type of nasty, negative, easy hit for those out there that were detractors. Yeah. And that's why part of the reason there were some of those amendments. The other reason that we had some of those amendments, the gun-free zones, it's the only way we could get the votes. I can tell you that is the only way we could have gotten the votes. There's no question about it. It was not a close call. Mike Green will tell you the same thing. Alan Cropsey will tell you the same thing. And our viewpoint was we can put forward a relatively narrow bill and open the door all the way through the process to the governor's desk and get it signed. Or we can do what those before us have tried to do, brass roots, and take the hell no approach, it's all or nothing, and get squat. Mm-hmm. And I was unique in the sense that I knew I would die on the hill for the bill. My predecessors had no interest in it. I had no idea if my successors would. So we rolled the dice, figured we'd go with the limited version and get what we could, open the door. And there were some heroes in that process. Mike Green obviously is one. He took a beating. There was a gentleman, I'm not going to say his name, he's still active in Lansing, and I don't want to cause him any backlash. Mm-hmm. But he was with MUCC at the time, and hugely helpful to me personally as speaker with many of the meetings in the back rooms, while MUCC's leadership aggressively opposed the measure. That takes people by surprise, but it is a fact. It was a different leader then, God rest his soul, but he opposed it, and no bones about it, and he was talking to members. This gentleman that worked for him actually supported it, but wanted it to be a balanced approach, let's get the door open, and he was hugely helpful with the development of that. And of course, as you know, the other group of fellows that were such a tremendous resource to me was Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, MCRGO. Mm-hmm. David Felbeck, Doc Felbeck, who was a U of M engineer prof, Glenn Griffith, and some others, just tremendous resources for language and development. And I know they helped Mike Green as well. So that's kind of the highlight of the story. We can take it from there.
Wow. That is a wealth of information. History. Isn't it odd that you and I are part of history now? I never thought, I didn't see that one coming. But hey, that was a really good synopsis. And I want to talk some more, but we're out of time for this segment. So we're going to take a 2-minute break here. While we're away, I want you to check out our sponsors, Center Shot Indoor Gun Range out of Dorr, Michigan, and then also firearmslegal.com/Midwest Tactical, and see what they can do for you if you ever need to use your firearm for self-defense and end up in the legal system. All right, when we come back, we're going to be speaking again with former Speaker of the House, Chuck Perricone. This is Skip Coryell on Home Defense Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Coryell in the Home Defense Show. Always use guns safely and wisely. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about my book, Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book. More and more people across the country are seeing the dangers in society and are deciding to carry concealed to protect themselves and their families. My new book lays it out step by step. It'll teach you how to protect and defend the ones you love. Get the benefit of 17 years of teaching experience and a lifetime of training for this important role in society and in your family. You can get Civilian Combat real easy. Just go to Amazon.com, search on Skip Coryell Civilian Combat, and it'll pop right up there. Don't put it off any longer. Get Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book by yours truly, Skip Coryell.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if life was like the movies and the good guys always won? In today's world, if you're forced to use your firearm to protect yourself, you will need protection. Firearms Legal Protection is here for you. FLP provides you with seasoned, experienced attorneys that handle your criminal and civil matters as a result of you protecting yourself. FirearmsLegal.com provides its members with uncapped attorney's fees, bail bond protection, and coverage in all 50 states. We are not a reimbursement plan. You can access uncapped attorney's fees for as low as $10 a month. Firearms Legal members are provided with educational services, training videos, and access to our vast national attorney network. While you're protecting yourself, let Firearms Legal protect you.
Listen up, folks. This is important. There are plenty of legal protection services out there, but none will protect you as well as Firearms Legal Protection. This is the one I use and the only one I recommend. Visit firearmslegal.com/Midwest Tactical and protect your family now. Would you like to take your tactical and marksmanship training to the next level? If the answer is yes, you need to check out Center Shot Indoor Gun Range just south of Grand Rapids, conveniently located off US 131. Center Shot is one of the most advanced firing ranges in Michigan. Center Shot firing lanes have nearly 100 customizable shooting programs to make you better no matter what your skill level. Our advanced lanes allow a more immersive training experience to enhance your senses. Controlled lighting and target movement mean that you get the best practice and most fun out of Center Shot Indoor Gun Range. Memberships are available for as low as $150. Center Shot also offers a 10% discount to U.S. military veterans. So, no matter what the weather, hot, cold, or in between, Center Shot Indoor Gun Range is always a perfect 70 degrees. This is where I train every week, and so should you. Find out more by going to CenterShotGunRange.com or call them at 616-371-7468. Stay safe, and I'll see you at Center Shot Indoor Gun Range. Okay, folks, welcome back to the Home Defense Show. There's your host, Skip Coryell. We are having a very informative conversation with a former Speaker of the House here in Michigan, Chuck Perricone. Chuck, you just took me to school, and you just summarized all that history, all that legislative process, from 1999, 2000. But I've got all kinds of questions now here, Chuck. First, the compromises that you made on the original bill, I believe that was House Bill 4530. You mentioned pistol-free zones. Pistol-free zones are just, 20 years later, they're like the bane of concealed carry holders because they just hate them so much. How did you decide which places should be pistol-free zones and which places should not? Was it arbitrary, or was there a study that went into it? How does that work?
Well, it was a mix. Yes, the Speaker presides over the session and controls the calendar and appoints the committees and yada, yada, yada. But when it comes to actually accumulating the votes you need, you get nothing done without half plus one. Nothing.
Right.
You can be the second coming, but if you don't have those votes, it ain't going nowhere. And people need to remember that. And that's why you run into the groupthink in Congress and legislatures and city councils and commissions that drive you nuts, because it's all committee. The individuals that you voted for don't control anything. It's half plus one. And that's what we had. So to get to that cumulative votes, we had to compromise, and those were put forth. And in defense of those that were pursuing that language, I have to say, while we were not the first state to go in this direction, there was a tremendous amount of concern. It was new territory. and people wanted to be cautious. And everyone in the discussion knew, including those that proposed the various pistol-free zones, that would be whittled away over the years. But that was predicated on the fundamental belief that would be because the policy would prove itself out to be responsible and safe. So if that's the case, let's go forth. And, number one, if you don't have the state police at least neutral, it's not going to happen. Governor won't sign it. So we had to deal with the fee. That's got everybody up in arms now, but you had to give them some money to do what we needed to have done. Yeah. Because we knew we had to have background checks. What we didn't know is that maybe the FBI wouldn't be very quick at doing those, but we had to deal with the fee. So, look, the one thing that I learned a lot from John Engler, and we weren't particularly close. We disagreed on a couple of key issues, but one thing I learned by observing him was most people think that you have to build consensus from the inside out and accumulate all the votes you need. What I think I learned watching John Engler was the reverse. If you clear the path of obstacles, the water has to flow, and it's going to flow a certain way. So once you turn your mind into that reverse view, it actually simplifies. Because now what you do, and I've done it ever since, is you look for what's in your way. And what was in our way were things like, where can people carry, where could they not carry, because that upsets people the most? Okay, that triggers a bit more of a water flow in the way of votes. And what about this issue and that issue? If you have a PPO and on and on. As you can see, when you think that way, pretty soon you've got the votes you need to move it and then some. And that's what resulted in happening. It was strong enough in the Senate, they had abstentions rather than no's. It was strong enough in the House, we got to 75. So, and the majority I had was only 58. So that's not a real controlling number. So we had to work in that direction. Now, since then, Doc Felbeck, we lost him a couple of years ago, a brilliant man, very passionate about the issue. His angle always was that if you begin exempting certain categories from the restrictions, it will relieve the pressure on the reduction of those restrictions enough that others will always be stuck with those restrictions. So don't let anybody off the hook, like retired law enforcement officers, former military, et cetera, because that's going to relieve just enough pressure to delay the redaction of the rest of these obstacles for everybody else. And I always thought that there was a lot of truth to that. Well, over time, one by one, a couple of those have fallen away. I think another one or two in the last year, and maybe another one will go this year if the governor signs. But that's where it started. Now, from a public perspective, not carrying a concealed weapon in a movie theater, a sports stadium, a hospital, for those that don't take the view that your listeners and we do, that is, you have to be honest, comforting. Yeah. They're not sitting in a dark movie theater wondering, are there guns in here? Well, you and I know there are, because there weren't any metal detectors at the door. Yeah. I've had this conversation 1,000 times. But most people don't view it that way. And we are in a democracy where most people control the rest of us. Right. So you have to be responsible, which takes me back to brass roots. You have an organization out there, Michigan Open Carry, that means well. And I respect the fact that they're healthy, operating, debating issues, working with legislators in their own way, which is a distinctly different way than MCRGO and not a path I would take. But they do what they do, and I respect that. But when you have instances like they had in Dearborn, and you have the public marches in public parks and on sidewalks with irons strapped to your shoulder, this is a game of politics. This is a game of majority versus minority. Hunters, as you know, the numbers continue to dwindle. Right. Those that carry are in a very distinct and very small minority. Those that believe in the Second Amendment, I would submit to you, those numbers are going down, especially with the millennials. Yeah. My point is, walking around with irons strapped to your thigh or your shoulder does not win us public sentiment. That is my cornerstone issue and point of difference with Michigan Open Carry. If that was taking place today, and that vote was coming up, there would be some challenges that are unnecessary just because of that. So my point of view is, and there will be people that would disagree with that, I'm all about people being able to defend their home and their family. That's what I'm about. I've had enough police officers tell me, a couple of them while they pulled me over for speeding, one guy because he thought he recognized me, and I'm not even going to tell you where that was. It was hilarious. He pulled me over, and I went on a side street, and he came up and, "Are you Chuck Perricone?" "Yes, I am." And it was right after I'd left office. "You moved CCW." He actually thanked me for it. A police officer thanked me for it. Now, he ran my plate for something, but he pulled me over, and he said that. And the reason he did is he said, "I try to tell people all the time, we can't be everywhere." And that's a point I wanted to make with you today. The backstory to those that will hear this or see it online 10 years from now, they have to understand, when we had the hearings in the House, we had single moms. There are two that I distinctly remember, one that lived in a trailer from up north that didn't have a lot of money, but they had kids. And they depended on these firearms for peace of mind because they were in rural counties. And they would say this in public testimony, where most of the land in the county was state land. The sheriff or the local law enforcement wasn't there. There wasn't anybody you could call. And if you did, it would take 20 to 30 minutes for anybody to get there. Now, I know there were people on that committee and in the legislature, the votes were turned on that testimony alone because these women were savvy enough to say, put yourself in my spot, and I have a toddler sleeping in the next room. I'm in the middle of frickin' nowhere. I can't move because I have a job. You're darn right. I want to be able to carry. Then we had other people that were related to finance industry, banking or others, making deposits. Now, law enforcement and others, detractors will say, "Oh, they could have gotten a permit anyway." Well, most of them did, but some of them didn't. And they felt that they needed protection because they were in questionable areas. And then you had the issue of the gun boards. We had 83 gun boards, one in each county. They were all over the map with their track records. It was some that would, unless you were a convicted felon, it was a yes. And there were others, most, that they really put you through the ringer, and we had a handful that just weren't going to do it. Now, remember, those gun boards consisted of the prosecutor, the sheriff, and one other person, and that's it. And it was arbitrary. So this bill started as an attempt to mandate shall issue so that we would have consistency county to county. That was the genesis of this. It was not Mike Green and myself deciding, let's give a gun to everybody. It was, we've got to make some sense out of this. It is completely and totally unfair. There were lawsuits. It didn't make any sense. And that was the main genesis catalyst for it. And that's the testimony that came in. The stories, in some cases, were quite touching, and they were very sincere. These people had no business making that long a drive and taking time off from work for this, but it mattered to them, and that's why we did it. And it was a very balanced, some would say controlled, bill, and a first step to get the door open to prove that people that go through background checks by the FBI and the state police that follow the rules, that have clean records, it's okay if they want to carry a firearm to protect themselves and have it in their home. It's okay. And as history shows, 20 years on, and in many different states, that's absolutely the case.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You raised, I guess, kind of a principle or a concept when you talk about politics. And I don't really think like a politician, I don't think. But you mentioned what I would view as the emotional aspect of it. How people are moved emotionally to vote a certain way, because of a single mom or whatever. But they can be moved the opposite direction by someone appearing to be aggressive, with an AR-15 on their back or something like that. Exactly how strong is that aspect of it?
It's everything.
Really?
People vote based on fear and anger. That's why negative campaigning is just ubiquitous. It proliferates every campaign. It works. You see it. If you watch the real-time interviews and surveys and groupthink on television where each of the people in the audience are turning a dial, it goes up and down, and it can be just as much about how they said the word as the word they said.
Mm-hmm.
It's science. It's a fact. You can't debate it. So I'll give you a short story. Around the corner here from where I live, I was at the gas station, and a guy got out of his pickup, and he came around, and he lifted up the corner of his T-shirt. And then for whatever reason, he stopped at the back of his pickup, and, the old cowboy shot, picks up the heel of his right foot and hooks it on the back of his bumper, and he's leaning there with his elbows on the back of his bed, and he tugs up his shirt again, and of course he's carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And he's moving it around with his hand as he's looking around at people, bright sunny day, and I'm thinking, okay, we've got a hot shot here, and he wants everybody to know he's carrying. We've all seen him, whatever. And I'm just continuing to pump my gas. Well, he walks into the gas station, and there was a woman on the other side of the pump who I hadn't noticed. And apparently she had a couple of kids in the back seat. And as he was walking away from my right to left to the door of the gas station, I heard her say, "Oh, my God." And I whipped around thinking, oh, what's going on? What happened? And I didn't even know you were there. And as it turns out, one of the kids had seen it and was asking her, and she says, it's okay, stay in the car. Just stay in the car. I'm almost done. And it's because this guy was doing whatever, and I'll be darned, he comes out of the gas station and he lifted up his shirt again. And he put his hand on the handle and stops at the back of his truck and looks around and then hops in. Now, obviously, he has self-esteem issues, or he wouldn't have been showing off and strutting like that.
Right.
My point is, that's not the first time I've seen that. Yeah. That's not the first time I've heard that. And I've had, as a Speaker of the House, I met literally thousands of people. I probably remember 24 names, but that is a common view. People that don't get it or believe in it vote. It doesn't matter whether or not they're well informed. They vote. Voting days come and go. You have to realize whatever your issue is, especially hunters, fishers, people that the abortion issue, folks that have controversial, otherwise known as core issues, we all have a few. Mm-hmm. People are where they are, and you may be able to sway them, and you probably won't if it's a core issue, but if it's fear, it's going to be really tough to overcome. They vote. There are more of those people than there are those that are open carrying or wish they were carrying or believe in the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. That's the way it is. So you either play the game and protect that right, or it's gone. Now, I'm running into more and more people these days, especially millennials, and it's not all millennials, but they know there's a bifurcation in the millennial group. They get it, that they question the Second Amendment and whether or not it's an absolute right. I had somebody arguing with me just yesterday. All the Bill of Rights have exceptions except the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment should too. Now, I didn't have time to get into it, but that's a quote. Mm-hmm. And there are people out there everywhere that look at it that way. And these people with firearms, and I don't carry very often, and to be honest with you, it's because I don't go to the urban areas as much as I used to, number one. And number two, I have always been paranoid that I'm going to just inadvertently walk into a place I shouldn't be carrying, and I'm going to get busted and look like an idiot. And it will be because I was thinking about, geez, I wish I could eat a cheeseburger, but I can't because I'd weigh 300 pounds. It'll be something stupid. So yeah. I just don't carry that much. But yeah, of course I have firearms in a safe, and I'm proud of it. But people just need to understand you got to ratchet it back. Do you want to be able to advertise the fact that you are carrying something? Or do you want to be able to carry something? That's the decision you need to make. And if you want to preserve the right to carry something, then you have to work with those that are all about making sure everybody knows they're carrying and get them to stop, because it's not helping us. The Second Amendment will be limited. You will lose the right to carry because of people like that and the fact that they fan the fears that are out there. Now, I'm going to be roasted for that online, but I'm telling you, I've been in the game. I walked away because it is a game, and I didn't want to play it for my entire life. Yeah. But that's how it works. And there are more people out there that don't understand it and just disagree with it than there are that believe in it. And I'm not saying you hide. I'm not saying you don't talk about it. I'm saying you just be, and you support it, and we educate, and we become a resource. And we continue to do what we do, which is follow the rules. And people don't have anything to grasp onto. But every time there's a public march, and the papers are just so excited to take those photos and put them on the front page, people go nuts. Mm-hmm. And there are more of them than there are us, and that's a problem. So, I believe in responsible gun ownership, and I'm not just talking safety. I'm talking responsible, because it is, in my opinion, an important right to be able to defend yourself. There's another major city in the U.S. that announced a few days ago, I think it was Dallas, actually, that they're not going to respond to certain crimes. You can call, but they're not coming. Detroit did that years ago. Major cities have done that all over the place. Now, it doesn't matter if they just came in and took a toaster. The point is they broke into the house. Now, you have a decision to make. Are you going to defend that home and who's in it or not? My vote is I want to be able to defend it. I want you to be able to defend it, especially if you have family in the home. So I tell people that get out there and cause ripples to knock it off, because this is an important right that I value, to defend myself and my family. And I know you and your listeners do as well. And we owe it to ourselves to preserve that. And I don't want this going away because of what I consider to be reckless, unnecessary behavior. Now, I know they do it because it's slippery slope and they're trying to make sure those edges stay broad and nobody comes into the turf and squeezes. Well, it's going to have the opposite effect, and I can tell you it already is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good explanation. Chuck, we are almost out of time here, but before we go, I really want to get your opinion on the political landscape right now. We're talking the state of Michigan. You know, we just lost the governorship, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General. What do you see as far as gun rights over the next couple of years?
Well, first and foremost, let me point out I haven't done anything partisan in 19 years. Mm-hmm. I am not a fan of the party structures. I am a fiscal conservative. I do tend to, my beliefs are my beliefs, and everybody knows, based on my tenure, what those tend to be. But I don't get caught up in the parties. I think that's the cause of most of the problems with this gridlock. Look, state politics are important, no question. The change in the governorship, it'll just shift the list of priorities. I know Gretchen. I've shared with Gretchen. She's not going to do anything crazy. You can't be single issue. You've got to think about life in general. She's going to do what she thinks is right, as every governor does. Rick Snyder was the same way. We can all nitpick which values and priorities they have, and we always will. But we don't agree with our spouses either, and I've had two of them. But look, it is what it is, and I don't get caught up in that, because the parties are a separate animal, and you got to play with the parties to get elected, and that's about as deep as that tie goes when you speak to these elected officials privately, and I know that, so I don't get worried about that. I think the firearms issue, obviously the courts, the Supreme Court, is probably not going to be a problem for a number of years. I think everyone can take comfort in that. Politically, sure, it's like the abortion issue. You're going to continue to have bills introduced. You're going to continue to have bills passed, maybe signed, but that's small ball. Big ball is the Supreme Court, the federal level, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But that's predicated upon people remaining vigilant and not doing stupid, silly things. Yeah. And we talked about that, and I think we just need to make sure that when you speak to someone, hey, tuck it into your belt. You don't need to wear it on your thigh. That's going to offend people that you don't even know it offended, that saw you across the street or in the coffee shop. There's no need for it. Let's just be responsible folks. And to me, having been there with my experience, the conversations I continue to have here in D.C., that is the recipe for preserving the right to keep and bear arms.
Awesome. All right. Well, Chuck, thank you very, very much. We're out of time here now, but, I just want to thank you very much for sharing your perspective and the benefit of the history and the behind-the-scenes look that you gave all of us, because, a lot of people these days, they don't know the history or they don't remember the history. So, Chuck, thank you very, very much for being on the Home Defense Show today.
Well, it was my pleasure, and always great to catch up with you, Skip. You've been a great friend.
All righty. Okay, folks, we got a 2-minute break. Now, go ahead and check out our sponsors. Go ahead and check out Center Shot Indoor Gun Range, centershotgunrange.com, and then also firearmslegal.com/Midwest Tactical. And when we come back in segment 4, I will tell you what I really think about Chuck Perricone. All right, this is Skip Coryell on the Home Defense Show. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back.
Welcome to my dad's Home Defense Radio show. You're gonna love it.
Hey folks, I want to tell you about my book, Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book. More and more people across the country are seeing the dangers in society and are deciding to carry concealed to protect themselves and their families. My new book lays it out step by step. It'll teach you how to protect and defend the ones you love. Get the benefit of 17 years of teaching experience and a lifetime of training for this important role in society and in your family. You can get Civilian Combat real easy. Just go to Amazon.com, search on Skip Coryell Civilian Combat, and it'll pop right up there. Don't put it off any longer. Get Civilian Combat, the Concealed Carry Book by yours truly, Skip Coryell.
This is Colonel Danny Gillum. I host Frontlines of Freedom, a weekly syndicated military talk radio show. One of my co-hosts is Skip Coryell, the host of this show. We cover things that impact military and veteran communities, and we do it from the veteran's perspective. The show is broadcast across the nation and is also available as a podcast on our website, frontlinesoffreedom.com. Please join Skip and me weekly on Frontlines of Freedom. Okay, Skip, it's time for the Armed America Report. What do you have this week?
All of us here at Frontlines of Freedom want our listeners to get trained and get armed in that order. We fully support the right to keep and bear arms for all law-abiding families, and we encourage you to find out about the laws governing use of deadly force in your state and follow them to the letter. And of course, don't forget to follow the rules of safety and common sense whenever you're carrying a firearm to protect the ones you love. What's the story this week, Colonel?
A domestic dispute escalated into violence one evening in Nebo, North Carolina, as a 69-year-old woman got into an altercation with her grandson, who was described as agitated over a grievance. In response, the young man allegedly dragged his grandmother and her wheelchair outside the house and began to assault her. The elderly woman's son-in-law, who lived nearby, witnessed the commotion, pulled out his firearm. The son-in-law shot the young man in the leg to prevent further injury to her. The grandmother had suffered injuries to her hands, arms, and neck, and her assailant had been charged with assault as deputies of the McDowell County Sheriff's Department continue to investigate.
Thanks, Colonel. This particular self-defense story is a picture of our times. In previous generations, young people were taught to respect their elders and were more likely to help them across the road than to assault them. But with the breakdown of our culture's moral fabric and the proliferation of drugs and alcohol, the elderly, more and more, are left to fend for themselves. Fortunately for this grandmother, one family member was willing to use deadly force to protect her against another relative. Violence against family members is now the norm. Here in America, according to the 2017 FBI Uniform Crime Report, a total of 15,129 murders were tracked in the study. Of those 15,000 murders, 6,103 victims knew their attacker. Most of them were killed by relatives. In fact, you are far more likely to be killed by someone you know than by a stranger. According to that same FBI crime report, 19.4% of victims were killed by strangers, compared to 80.6% who were killed by someone they knew. This statistic is important because it means that you may have to defend your life against someone that you love. Do you have what it takes to shoot someone that you love? That is a huge question and one that most people don't want to ask. However, if you have someone in your life who is mentally ill or abusing drugs and alcohol, then you would do well to answer that question now. Do a thorough evaluation of your physical and emotional capabilities and make preparations accordingly. If you decide that you cannot use deadly force against someone you love, even to protect your own life, then get armed and trained using less than lethal force, such as pepper spray, tasers, stun guns, strike pens, tactical whips, telescopic batons, and beanbag rounds. Of course, before possessing or deploying any of these weapons, you should first consult a competent and licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. Oh, and don't forget to brush up on your open-handed skills, as your body is the only weapon that is always with you.
Well said, dude.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the Home Defense Show. This is your host, Skip Coryell. Awesome guy, Chuck Perricone. I told you, I'd tell you what I really think about this guy. And awesome is a good word for it. The guy, he's got virtue, he's got character, he stands up for what he believes in, and he does it in his own way. You know, he fought hard for Michigan's concealed carry law, and it's quite possible that it would have taken years to get it if Chuck Perricone had not partnered with Mike Green and Alan Cropsey, you know, the people in the Senate, to get this done. He saw what needed to be done. He had a firm conviction about it, and he went to bat for all of us. So, my hat's off to Chuck Perricone, former Speaker of the House of the Michigan State House of Representatives. What is Chuck doing right now? Chuck is a director for Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners. You can check out MCRGO by going to mcrgo.org. That's Michael Charlie Romeo Golf Oscar.org. And you can check out that organization there. You know, my first meeting with Chuck Perricone, I didn't know him while he was Speaker of the House. I didn't get to know Chuck until he had retired from that position. And then he was, at the time he contacted me, he was the executive director of Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners. And I was the state director for Ted Nugent United Sportsmen of Michigan. And, you know, just from out of the blue, I get this email from the former Speaker of the House, and he says, hey, I want to work with the Ted Nugent organization. You know, how can MCRGO work with you to further advance gun rights and hunting rights here in the state of Michigan? And I go, hey, that's a no-brainer. And we got to know each other, and we worked together on some things, and it was just awesome. A lot of times, gun organizations see each other as competitors instead of allies. You know, we're all on the same team here. It doesn't matter what pro-gun organization you're part of. Work together. Work together. Sure, you know, we all differ a little bit on exactly how the agenda should be implemented. How do we get from point A to point B? We're going to differ on that because we're all different people, right? But in the end, we're all on the same team. And that's one thing I really always admired about Chuck. He was there. He didn't know me, but he worked with me. And let's face it, not everyone wants to associate with Ted Nugent, okay? Ted is one of those guys that has a polarizing effect, right? Personally, I love him, but not everybody does. Okay, one personal note here. I just want to let you know that I am true to my word. I am up to page 160 on my new book, Concealed Carry for Christians. That will be out in about 2 weeks. So, I'm working hard on that. I've got about another 30, 40 pages to go. It will be done. And don't forget to mark off on your calendar, my first book signing with my new book will be May 25 at Center Shot Indoor Gun Range in Dorr, Michigan. You can go to centershotgunrange.com and see the flyer. Go on Facebook. It's all over there. But May 25, going to have all kinds of good stuff there. Going to have a picnic. We're going to grill some hot dogs and brats and stuff like that. Going to have an archery shoot for the kids. Going to have the book signing with me and Colonel Denny Gillum from Front Lines of Freedom. And then Rick Weist, his Operation Rumination military combat vet book that he's just written. That's awesome as well. And they're also going to have a poker shoot. Some good competition, lots of fun, going to be prizes, and lots of good food. That is going to be from noon to 4 on May 25, Saturday before Memorial Day at Center Shot Indoor Gun Range in Dorr, Michigan. You don't want to miss that. Once again, check out MCRGO, Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, at www.michaelcharlieromeo.golfoscar.org. Well, okay, folks, that about wraps it up for this week's episode of the Home Defense Show. Until next week, remember your purpose in life is to find something greater than yourself and serve it. Always remember, God, family, country, in that order. It's important how you live, but it's equally important how you die. Your family and the ones you love need your protection, so train, always train, stay alert, stay alive. Until next week on the Home Defense Show, this is your host, Skip Coryell. God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless America.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Home Defense Show. Now, get out there and protect the ones you love. We'll see you next week with more of the best in home defense.
Bye-bye, boys! Have fun storming the castle!